What if the person who irritates you the most is actually your greatest teacher, and you've been failing the lesson every single day? Good evening, friend. Settle in. What I'm about to share with you may be the single most liberating idea you will ever encounter, not because it is complicated, but precisely because it is not. There is a question I want you to sit with for just a moment. When was the last time someone made you angry? Not mildly annoyed, genuinely angry. Perhaps it was someone in traffic this morning. Perhaps it was a coworker who spoke carelessly. Perhaps it was someone much closer to you, someone who should have known better and didn't. Now here is the more important question. Who suffered most from that anger? If you answered honestly, and I trust that you did, the answer was you. We live in a world that has convinced us that our emotions are things that happen to us. That anger arrives uninvited like rain, and there is little we can do but get wet. But that, my friend, is one of the great misunderstandings of human life. Anger is not something that happens to you. Anger is something you do. It is a response. And responses, unlike events, can be chosen, shaped, and over time transformed entirely. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, a man who governed an empire and faced adversities most of us will never know, wrote this from a tent on the front lines of war. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. He was not writing for emperors. He was writing for you. Now, let us talk plainly about what anger really is. When someone bothers you, when they cut you off in traffic, when they speak rudely, when they behave selfishly or foolishly, what is actually happening inside you? You are encountering a gap between how you believe they should behave and how they actually behaved. That gap, that distance between expectation and reality, is where anger is born. Every single time. This means something remarkable. It means that your anger is less about them and more about you, about the picture in your mind of how the world ought to run. And the moment you understand that, something begins to shift. You stop being a thermometer, simply registering the temperature around you, and you begin becoming a thermostat, setting the temperature yourself. Here is the central truth I want you to carry with you, long after this broadcast ends. No one can disturb your peace without your permission, and wisdom is learning to stop granting it. Read that again slowly. Let it settle. No one can disturb your peace without your permission. This is not merely a comforting thought. It is a law of human psychology as dependable as gravity. The moment you accept it, truly accept it, other people lose the power to ruin your day, your mood, your morning, or your life. But let us be practical, because wisdom without application is simply poetry. How does a person actually build this? How do you train yourself to remain calm, steady, and unbothered in a world full of people who haven't yet discovered what you're discovering right now? It begins with something I call the pause. Between every event and every response, there exists a space. Most people never notice it. They move from event to explosion so quickly that it feels automatic, feels inevitable, feels justified. But it is not automatic. That space exists, and your entire character lives inside it. When someone behaves in a way that would normally trigger you, your first practice is simply this pause. One breath, just one. In that single breath, you are no longer a reactor. You are a thinker. And thinkers, not reactors, are the ones who build extraordinary lives. The second practice is what I call the biography check. When someone is rude to you, hostile, dismissive, or unkind, understand this. You are almost certainly not the cause. You are the nearest target. That man who snapped at you this morning carries a biography you know nothing about. That colleague who criticized you unfairly is living inside a story filled with pressures and fears that have nothing to do with you. This is not an excuse for their behavior. It is simply a fact, and facts, when clearly seen, dissolve anger like sunlight dissolves fog. You begin to look at difficult people not with contempt, but with something quieter, something almost like understanding, not agreement, not approval, simply understanding. And understanding, my friend, is a far more powerful place to stand than anger ever was. The third practice is perhaps the most important of all. I call it the long view. Ask yourself honestly, will this matter in 5 years? In most cases, not all, but most, the honest answer is no. The meeting that ran too long, the comment that felt like a slight, the driver who didn't signal, the friend who forgot to call back. In 5 years, these things will be invisible. They will have left no mark on your life whatsoever. And if they will leave no mark in 5 years, why permit them to leave a mark today? The person who can hold the long view in moments of friction has access to a calm that most people search for their entire lives without finding. Now, I want to speak to those of you who say, Earl, this all sounds fine. But what about the genuinely difficult people? The ones who seem determined to make things hard? What about them? Fair question. Here is what I know about difficult people. They are carrying a weight they don't know how to put down. Their difficulty is not your assignment to fix, but it is your opportunity to model something better. Every time you remain calm in the presence of chaos, every time you respond with quiet dignity where others would react with noise, you are doing something far more powerful than winning an argument. You are demonstrating to yourself, to the room, and to everyone watching what a fully developed human being looks like. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, one of the greatest contributions a person can make to the world around them. There is a concept in Eastern philosophy called equanimity. It is the art of remaining fundamentally undisturbed, not numb, not cold, but steady, regardless of what the world presents. The equanimous person feels things. They are not stoned. They notice the frustration, they acknowledge the irritation, and then they choose not to become it. They're the eye of the storm. Still, centered, completely present. Let me ask you something that might be uncomfortable at first. Think about the last time you lost your temper, really lost it. Maybe it was sudden, a sharp word from someone you trusted, a situation that spun out of control, a moment where everything inside you ignited at once. And afterward, perhaps you sat quietly and thought, where did that come from? As if something foreign had moved through you, as if you had no say in the matter whatsoever. That feeling, that sense of helplessness over your own reactions, is one of the most quietly terrifying places a human being can find themselves. Because if you cannot trust yourself to remain steady, if you cannot predict what version of yourself will show up under pressure, then what exactly are you building your life upon? Most people carry this quietly. They don't speak about it. But it follows them into their relationships, into their work, into the mirror at the end of a long day. Now, stay with me here. What if everything you believed about anger, about where it comes from, about why it happens, about whether you can do anything about it, what if all of it needs to be reconsidered, not discarded? Reconsidered. Because here is what the science of human behavior tells us, what the great philosophers understood centuries before laboratories confirmed it, and what every genuinely composed person has quietly discovered on their own. The anger was never automatic. It only felt that way. Between every single event in your life and every response you give to that event, there exists a moment. A tiny, almost invisible moment of processing. Your brain receives information, evaluates it against your beliefs, your expectations, your history, and then produces what we call a reaction. That production process, that is entirely yours. You are not a vending machine, dispensing anger whenever someone presses the wrong button. You are a thinking human being with the extraordinary capacity to intercept that process, to step inside that moment before the reaction arrives and ask a single, powerful question. Is this the response I would choose if I were choosing deliberately? For the moment you ask that question, truly ask it, something settles. Something in the chest loosens. The heat that was rising begins to cool. Not because the situation changed. Not because the other person suddenly became reasonable, but because you remembered something they forgot. That you are in charge here. Not in charge of them. Not in charge of what happens around you, but completely, irrevocably in charge of what happens within you. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, the whole thing. Anger is a choice. It arrives dressed as instinct, convincing, urgent, justified. But beneath that costume, it is still a choice. And choices, unlike reflexes, can be trained, refined, and ultimately mastered. You are not at the mercy of your emotions. You are their architect. Begin building accordingly starting today. There is something that happens to nearly every person at some point during an ordinary day. Someone speaks to you sharply. Someone dismisses your idea without a second thought. Someone is cold where you expected warmth, critical where you expected fairness, selfish where you expected consideration. And something inside you tightens. A voice rises. Why would they do that? What did I do to deserve that? Who do they think they are? And just like that, your morning is gone. Your focus is gone. Your peace, that quiet, steady thing you had carefully carried into the day, is gone. Surrendered entirely to someone who may not have given you a second thought since the moment it happened. If you have ever felt that, and I believe every honest person listening has, then I want you to stay with me, because what I am about to share with you may permanently change the way you experience other people. Now, before you decide how to respond to someone's behavior, before you construct the story of what it means and what it says about you, pause for just a moment longer than usual, because there is a question worth asking that most people never think to ask. What is going on inside that person? Not as an excuse for them, not as a way of minimizing what happened, but as a genuine, honest inquiry into the nature of human behavior. Here is what decades of human observation, from the philosophers of ancient Greece to the psychologists of the modern era, have consistently confirmed. People do not treat you according to who you are. They treat you according to who they are. Every sharp word a person delivers carries the fingerprint of their own unresolved pain. Every dismissal reflects their own insecurity. Every act of coldness traces back to a story, a long, complicated, deeply personal story that began long before you ever entered the picture. That colleague who criticized you unfairly this morning, he went home last night to a conversation that left him feeling small. That stranger who was inexplicably rude, she is carrying a weight today that has absolutely nothing to do with you. Their behavior is their autobiography, written by their wounds, their fears, their history, their unmet needs. You simply happened to be standing nearby when a page turned. And the moment that truth lands, really lands, something remarkable happens inside you. The tightness releases. The internal argument quiets. The urgent need to defend yourself, to retaliate, to spend the next 3 hours replaying the moment, it simply loses its grip, because you realize clearly and calmly that you were never truly the subject of their behavior. You were the nearest available surface. That is not a consolation. That is liberation. You are not responsible for the chapters other people are living. You are only responsible for the story you choose to write in response. And the wisest response, always without exception, is to keep writing yours, steadily, deliberately, unbothered, starting today. There is a discovery that changes everything about the way a person moves through the world. Not a discovery made in a laboratory. Not something found in the latest research paper or the newest self-help trend. This is something far older, far quieter, and far more personal than any of that. It is the discovery that what is happening inside you at any given moment is infinitely more powerful than what is happening around you. Most people have it backwards their entire lives. They spend enormous energy trying to arrange the outside world, the people, the circumstances, the conditions, so that they can finally feel calm, finally feel steady, finally feel in control. And they are perpetually disappointed because the outside world refuses to cooperate. It always has. It always will. And so they wait for better circumstances, for more agreeable people, for a quieter, easier, less complicated life. And that waiting, that endless, exhausting waiting, becomes the shape of their days. Now, I want you to consider something with me. What if the arrangement you have been attempting is simply the wrong arrangement entirely? What if the order is not, fix the outside, then feel peace inside? What if the actual order, the one that genuinely works, the one that every composed and effective person has quietly discovered, is precisely the reverse? Fix the inside first, and watch what happens to everything else. Here is what I mean by that. Your inner world, the thoughts you habitually think, the beliefs you carry about people and situations, the internal narrative that runs quietly beneath every experience. That inner world is the lens through which every single outer event is filtered. Two people can sit in the same traffic jam. One arrives at the office tense, irritable, already behind before the day begins. The other arrives thoughtful, unhurried, completely intact. The traffic was identical. The inner world was not. Two people can receive the same critical comment from the same person. One is destabilized for the rest of the afternoon. The other considers it briefly, takes what is useful, discards what is not, and moves forward without missing a step. The comment was identical. The inner world was not. This is not theory. This is the daily lived experience of every person who has done the quiet, unglamorous work of building a stable interior life. And that work, that patient, deliberate cultivation of the mind, is available to every single person listening to this broadcast right now. When you begin to tend your inner world, when you examine your beliefs, challenge your assumptions, and deliberately choose the thoughts you permit to take up residence in your mind, something shifts profoundly. Situations that once triggered immediate reactions begin to slow down. People who once had the power to ruin your afternoon lose that power entirely. Not because they changed, because your inner foundation became solid enough that their behavior simply could not penetrate it. You stop being a leaf carried by whatever wind happens to be blowing. You become something rooted, something steady, something that can bend without breaking and stand without straining. Master your inner world, your thoughts, your beliefs, your habitual responses, and you will find that you have simultaneously mastered your outer reactions. Not someday, not after the circumstances improve. Now, from the inside out. That is where all genuine transformation has always begun, and it is precisely where yours begins today. There is a thief operating in most people's lives so quietly, so consistently, so invisibly, that they never once suspected. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It simply settles into the background of your daily experience and begins its work, steadily, patiently, relentlessly, dismantling your peace one small disappointment at a time. You wake up with a perfectly reasonable day ahead of you, and then something doesn't go the way you anticipated. Someone doesn't respond the way you assumed they would. A situation unfolds differently than the version you had already constructed in your mind, and suddenly, without quite understanding why, you are frustrated, irritated, quietly furious at something you cannot even fully articulate. That thief has a name, and most people spend their entire lives never identifying it. It is the unexamined expectation, silently building blueprints for how everything should go, and then presenting you with the bill when reality refuses to follow the plans. Now, before you conclude that the solution is simply to expect nothing, to lower the bar so completely that nothing can disappoint, stay with me a moment longer, because that is not what I am suggesting, and it would not serve you if I did. A life without expectation is a life without direction, without standard, without the kind of healthy anticipation that pulls a person forward. Expectation, in its proper place, is entirely necessary. The question is not whether you have expectations. The question is whether your expectations are conscious or invisible. Here is the distinction that changes everything. A conscious expectation is one you have examined. You know it exists. You have considered whether it is reasonable. You have asked honestly, is it fair for me to expect this from this person, in this situation, at this moment in their life? And having asked that question, you hold the expectation with open hands rather than clenched fists. An invisible expectation, and this is where most frustration is manufactured, is one you have never examined at all. It simply lives inside you, unquestioned and unchallenged, silently insisting that the world and everyone in it conform to a standard they were never informed of and never agreed to. Your colleague should have responded by now. Your friend should have understood without being told. That stranger should have been more considerate. The meeting should have been shorter. The morning should have gone more smoothly. Should. That word in all its quiet tyranny is expectation operating without your awareness. And every time reality fails to honor it, frustration is the automatic result. The moment you begin to examine your expectations, to bring them from the shadows into the clear, honest light of conscious awareness, something genuinely remarkable begins to happen. You start to notice how many of your daily frustrations were never really about other people at all. They were about the gap between the blueprint in your mind and the building that actually went up. And once you see that gap clearly, you gain something extraordinary, the ability to choose, to adjust the blueprint rather than rage at the building. To ask, is my expectation realistic here? Is it fair? Is it serving me? Or is it quietly costing me my peace, my relationships, my mornings, my days? That single question, asked honestly and regularly, dissolves more frustration than any other practice I know. You are not at the mercy of a disappointing world. You are, in many cases, simply holding a map that doesn't match the territory. Update the map. Examine the expectation. Hold people, including yourself, to standards that are clear, considered, and fair. Do that consistently, and you will find that the world becomes a far less frustrating place to live. Not because it changed, because you finally understood what was building the frustration all along, and that understanding begins today. There is a word that makes certain people deeply uncomfortable the moment they hear it applied to human relationships, and I understand why. Because on the surface, at first encounter, it sounds like a kind of abandonment, a coldness, a deliberate withdrawal from the warmth and investment that make relationships and experiences meaningful in the first place. It sounds like the advice of someone who has given up, someone who has been hurt enough times that they have simply decided to stop caring altogether. And if that were what it meant, if that were truly what was being suggested, then the discomfort would be entirely justified. Because a life lived without genuine care, without investment, without the willingness to be moved by what matters, that is not strength, that is not wisdom. That is simply a very sophisticated form of hiding. But that is not what I am talking about, not even close. Now, before you place this idea in the same drawer as detachment's lesser imposters, numbness, apathy, emotional withdrawal, I want you to hold it for just a moment longer. Because what I am describing is something else entirely. Something that the greatest thinkers, the most effective leaders, and the most genuinely peaceful human beings throughout history have quietly practiced. Not as a retreat from life, but as the very foundation that allowed them to engage with life more fully, more honestly, and more powerfully than those around them. True detachment is not the absence of care. It is the absence of dependency. Here is the distinction I want you to carry with you. When you are attached, not to people, but to outcomes, to reactions, to whether someone approves of you, to whether a situation unfolds precisely as you hoped, you place your peace in a location entirely outside your control. You become, in the most literal sense, dependent. Dependent on other people's moods. Dependent on circumstances cooperating. Dependent on the world behaving according to your preferences. And since none of those things are reliably within your jurisdiction, your peace becomes permanently fragile. Permanently negotiable. Permanently at the mercy of whatever happens next. That is an exhausting way to live, and most people are living it without realizing there is another way entirely. Detachment, genuine, mature, considered detachment, means you care deeply about the people and pursuits in your life while simultaneously releasing your grip on how they must respond, how they must unfold, how they must make you feel in order for you to remain whole. You invest fully. You engage completely. You bring your entire self to what matters. But you do not require a particular return on that investment in order to maintain your equilibrium. You are like a deeply rooted tree. The wind moves through your branches, sometimes gently, sometimes with considerable force. You feel it, you move with it, but your roots do not shift. Your foundation does not crack. You remain fundamentally and unmistakably standing. And here is what that kind of detachment produces in the daily fabric of your life. When someone responds poorly to your kindness, you are not devastated because your sense of self was never suspended on their reaction. When a situation deteriorates despite your best efforts, you are not shattered, because your worth was never contingent on the outcome. When someone attempts to disturb your peace with criticism, hostility, or indifference, they find, to their considerable surprise, that there is simply nothing to grab hold of. Not because you don't care, but because you have built something inside yourself that their behavior cannot reach. That is not coldness. That is not indifference. That is the quiet, unshakable dignity of a person who has decided, deliberately and completely, that their inner stability belongs to them alone. Detachment is strength in its most refined form. It is caring without clinging, engaging without depending, living fully without surrendering your foundation to the unpredictability of everything outside you. Practice it. Build it. One conscious moment at a time, and discover what it feels like to finally stand on ground that no one else can move. Starting today. There is a moment that visits every person without exception. It arrives uninvited, usually at the most inconvenient time, wrapped in the most unpleasant packaging imaginable. It might come wearing the face of a difficult colleague. It might arrive through the words of someone who dismissed you unfairly. It might appear in the form of a situation that refused to cooperate, a plan that collapsed, a person who tested every ounce of patience you believed you possessed. And in that moment, that hot, uncomfortable, thoroughly unwelcome moment, your entire system signals one thing with absolute certainty. This should not be happening, and so you resist it. You argue with it internally. You replay it. You rehearse what you should have said, what you might still say, what this person deserves to hear. You carry the irritation forward into the next hour, the next conversation, the next day, like a stone in your pocket that grows heavier with every step. And the opportunity, the quiet, extraordinary opportunity hidden inside that very moment, passes completely unnoticed. Now, I want you to consider a possibility that may initially seem too simple to be taken seriously. What if every irritation, without exception, is carrying something valuable inside it? Not as a comfortable idea to make difficulty more bearable, not as a philosophical nicety designed to help you feel better about unpleasant experiences, but as a genuine, operational truth about how human beings actually grow, how character is actually built, how the person you are capable of becoming is actually forged. Stay with that possibility for just a moment longer before you decide. Here is what I know about human growth after years of studying it carefully. Comfort does not build character. Ease does not develop resilience. The situations that arrive perfectly arranged, the people who always agree, the days that unfold without friction, these produce very little of lasting value in a person's interior life. It is resistance that builds strength. Every time. Without exception. The irritation you experience, that specific person, that recurring situation, that particular variety of frustration that seems almost personally designed to unsettle you, is pointing, with remarkable precision, directly at the edge of your current capacity. And edges, in human development, are not boundaries. They are invitations. That person who tests your patience is revealing exactly where your patience currently ends, and therefore exactly where it needs to be extended. That situation that triggers your frustration is exposing a belief, an expectation, or a rigidity inside you that is quietly limiting your freedom. That colleague whose behavior unsettles you is holding up a mirror, not to show you their flaws, but to show you the precise location of your next area of growth. This is not punishment. This is curriculum. Life, when understood correctly, is the most sophisticated and perfectly personalized school ever designed. And irritation, in all its uncomfortable, unwelcome, thoroughly inconvenient forms, is consistently among its most effective teachers. The question is never whether the lesson is worth learning. The question is simply whether you are willing to recognize it as a lesson at all, rather than merely an injustice to be endured or an obstacle to be resented. And when you make that shift, when you begin approaching irritation, not as an interruption to your peace, but as a precise and purposeful signal pointing toward your growth, something changes at a fundamental level. The difficult person loses their power to derail you. The frustrating situation loses its ability to diminish you, because you are no longer simply surviving the experience. You are extracting something from it, something that makes you more patient, more perceptive, more composed, more capable than you were before it arrived. You begin to understand that the people and situations that challenge you most severely were not your adversaries. They were, in the most honest sense, your greatest contributors. Every irritation carried an invitation, and you finally had the wisdom to accept it. Growth does not wait for comfortable moments. It arrives wrapped in exactly the circumstances you would least have chosen. Recognize it. Receive it. Rise to meet it. That is where the next, better version of you has been waiting all along, and it begins, as it always does, today. And here is the beautiful truth. Equanimity is not a gift that some are born with and others are not. It is a skill. It is practiced. It is built quietly and deliberately, one moment of conscious choice at a time. Let me leave you with this before we close. The person who never gets rattled, who walks through the noise of modern life with composure and grace, is not lucky. They are not naturally gifted with some special temperament. They have simply decided, at some point along the road, that their peace of mind is worth protecting. They decided that the actions of other people, however foolish, however unkind, however frustrating, are simply not worth the cost of their own serenity. They decided that they are, at all times, the author of their own inner world. You can make that same decision right now. Today, not someday. So here is what I want you to do today, not someday. Tonight, before you sleep, identify one person or one situation that has been stealing your peace. Just one. Write it down. And beside it, write this question. What would a calm, wise, fully developed person do here? Then, and this is the step most people skip, commit to being that person tomorrow. Not perfectly, not all at once. Just 1 degree better than yesterday. Practice the pause. Apply the biography check. Hold the long view. Do this for 30 days, and I promise you something will change, not the people around you, but something far more valuable. You will change. And when you change, when you truly become the kind of person who cannot be rattled, cannot be baited, and cannot be diminished by the smallness of others, you will discover something remarkable. The world didn't get calmer. You got stronger. And that, my friend, is the only victory that ever truly mattered. Good night and great living to you.